Okay. Donna's sending the URL, and we're doing the thingy to switch over. So Google, you'll miss the end of it. What was I supposed to do? What do you mean it went away?
I don't know what it is. I'll just start timer and go.
So is the Google going?
Yes.
Okay. Started then. This week we begin with chapter 14 of Vayikra. That's Leviticus for those of you who don't know. And I've really given the introduction to chapter 14 already, back in the introduction to chapter 13. If you guys remember, we did the introduction to both of these chapters together because they're essentially one chapter. They should not probably have been broken up. It's okay. It's not like anybody got harmed by it, or that it doesn't change anything. But we're on the same subject. It expands a little bit, but it's still the same subject. We're still talking about the skin disease. Of course, now this is what we do. We're at the end of this skin disease. So let's move on with it. Of course, it's a good place to start a chapter because it begins with Vayedaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, right? So and Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, comma, and it's not really a. Let's see. Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, yeah. See, that's not a proper sentence, but in Hebrew it is. Because this is the way you begin a new thought in Hebrew. For instance, there's this thing that has really taken Christianity way off to the left, and because of it, they're paying for their mistake dearly. That's in the first chapter of the book of Romans. Because here's what's happened. They've forgotten or never knew, perhaps, that Jewish rabbis wrote that stuff. All of it. And no, let's see, who was it? Matthew, Mark, Luke. Which one was it? Luke. Luke's the one that they thought was a Gentile. No, he was not. They thought he was a doctor of medicine. No, he wasn't. He was a doctor of the law, doctor of the Torah. And his name was actually probably Aharon, because Luke means light bringer, light bearer. How do you say that in Hebrew? Aharon. Okay. So, but anyway, the whole thing was written by Jews in the Hebrew language from Hebrew thought, all of it. Now, the fact that some so-called Christians, that's not what they were called back then, but they call them that now, right? But these people who started this new religion, and Christianity was a new religion. It does not actually stem from the Bible. They use the Bible to start this new religion, but it does not come from the time of Yeshua and his Talmudim. None of that is connected, other than they took the letters written by these rabbis trained by Yeshua to create their new religion. There is a complete separation there. Christianity does not have Hebrew roots. Sorry. But anyway, they read this chapter written by Shaul, whom they call Paul. It's weird, but they do. But this guy Shaul, he writes the first chapter, and there is no Veyadaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. That's not in there. And there would have been something along those terms if Shaul would have changed the subject. And it's not there. So you have a problem here because they changed the subject. You go 2/3 of the way down, and we're talking about idol worship. And then all of the sudden, out of left field, we're talking about a completely different subject. We're talking about something that is heavily related to the town of San Francisco. Can I just say it that way and not have to get into what I'm talking about? You adults should know what I'm talking about. And that's all I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to be not cross any lines here. So think of what I just said, and you'll know what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, it takes this dramatic turn from talking about idol worship to something completely different. And this is not there. There is no indication uh, from these Jews that the subject has changed, but the subject did change. Why did it change? Okay, if you want to totally understand how I know that this is wrong, besides the Hebrew thing, because, oh, Rob, it's in Greek. It wasn't when it was written. What we have left of, are the translations from the Hebrew. And it's easy to tell that they were translations from the Hebrew, because if you take the Greek words, particularly in the sentences that make no sense in Greek, and you replace those with Hebrew words, you now have perfectly formed Hebrew sentence. Hello, right? You know this was written in Hebrew in the beginning. It was translated into Greek, and it wasn't really all that badly translated if you realize they're just giving you a word-for-word translation most of the time. If you know that, then translating it into Hebrew should be very easy for you to do. This is missing. This change of subject, God saying to somebody, spoke to somebody saying, and then we go into that. That's how you change a subject by these people who lived in this time, and this is missing. So what I'm saying is the subject never changed. But why did it change? Well, because by the time you get to the 1800s, when the King James, or that's not 1800s, what am I saying? 15, let's see, it was 1611 when the book came out. So it's the late 1500s, very late 1500s that they begin on this, and they finish it up through the early 1600s, and then by 1611 they get this thing printed. Well, the dictionaries that were around by then had taken words that didn't have certain meanings and gave them more meaning. So if you go backwards, if you look at these dictionaries from the 1500s and compare that to a dictionary from the 1400s, and then compare that to a dictionary from the 1200s, that's about as far back as they go. But more interestingly, take it from the 15s and go the other way to the 16s, the 17s, the 1800s. You'll see that every word in the dictionary, by the time it starts to the time it finishes, has completely different meanings. So you take a word like adultery, which was the word where they get this idea. It speaks of adultery, which in its time meant to break a covenant. It had nothing to do with physical intimacy. Can I say it that way? Adultery had nothing to do with that. The word was used because it was the breaking of a covenant. If a married person had intimacy with somebody other than their spouse, that was adultery. It had nothing to do with the act itself. It was talking about the breaking of a covenant. And it started off there, and then it becomes something intimate, something physical. And then it goes from being between a husband and a wife to now we're going to add it. Well, prostitutes do that. Married men find a prostitute, and so we add the prostitution. Well, then later on, a couple of 100 years later, well, male prostitutes do the same thing. So then they get added in. And then later on, it becomes something completely physical and completely about men with men. Holy cow. And he never changed the subject. From the very first word in chapter 1 to the very last word in chapter 1, the whole thing is about idol worship and has nothing to do with the goings on in San Francisco. Nothing. Anyway, so there is no change. You have to have this to change. And then it's not necessarily going to completely change. It may just be think of it as a bullet point. You've got this main idea. And then there will be a sentence, something like this, and God said to somebody, or spoke to somebody saying. Now, this isn't the only way it can be done, but this is the most common. And then from there, you're going to say something else, but in the end, it's really just a bullet point of the previous. It really hasn't changed that dramatically. But this does give you the ability to have a change from time to time that is completely different. Very dramatic change, a completely different subject. happens all the time. It's not uncommon. So, but you have to have something like this, or you can't change the subject, which, of course, people who knew nothing about Hebrew custom, culture, language, history, they went ahead and changed the subject. That's all I'm saying. So we start off with God said something. So now we're changing. We're going into a bullet points. What we're doing, it really isn't going to change that much, but there is a difference. So we now have the idea that there's a new subject. So now it says in verse 2, Zot tia torat ha zorah b'yom taharato vehuva el hakohen. So let's look at some words that are really important here, because like Zot is this, Tia means will be or will come to pass. And then let's look at Torah, instruction. Instruction. Torah is not the Hebrew word for law. It is the Hebrew word for instruction. Instruction. So think about when you're reading the New Testament for the Christian ones and the people who come out of Christianity into this thing, or people who are Christians who are dabbling and listening in. Think about how many times the New Testament talks about the what is that, noma in Greek? It is translated law constantly in the New Testament. Think about 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. Never forget those. Never forget that verse. You should memorize that verse. I don't care if you're a Jew or a Christian. You should memorize that verse, because it says, everyone who commits sin is also in violation of, it says law in English. What's the law? It's the noma or noma. What is the word? Nomos. No, well, nomo would still be fine. Nomos would be more accurate, I think. That's Torah. So if you're in violation of the law, well, we live by the 10 Commandments, but we don't live by that 613 laws. So what do you think the 613 laws are? They're the instruction. They're the Torah, the instructions that go with that law you say you follow, which means you don't get to live by 10 and ignore the rest because you have no instruction in how to do the 10 without the Torah. Just saying. And look how many times it shows up in the New Testament. Hundreds and hundreds of times. And they're talking about this very word. It's instruction. This is thou shalt not kill. Well, now you need some instruction. You know what the different. You need to know what killing means. Can you kill animals? Of course you can. That's a call to sacrifice. You kill it, you cut it up, you cook it, you eat it. So there's killing that's allowed. So you can't just make a blanket statement. Well, some people say it's you shall not murder. Well, that's more accurate, but it actually means don't shed innocent blood. That's what it actually means. So you need to know what innocent blood is. Because if you don't know that abortion is killing innocent blood, you're going to be okay with abortion and say things like, my body, my right. Men don't understand. They shouldn't talk about it. Okay, well, how about God? Can he talk about it? Because we got to know that there's instruction in that book. Well, I wish life came with an instruction manual. Well, it does. It's called the Bible. It's the Torah. That's literally what this word means. So yes, there is an instruction manual for raising kids, for how to handle yourself at your job, for how to become a good husband, a good wife, a good obedient servant to God Almighty. It's all in there. The instruction, that the word means instruction. There is an instruction manual, is all I'm saying. Anyway, that's our word. Hopefully I didn't get too crazy with it. All right. So the next word I wanted to look at before we move on is Hametzorah. That's the infected one. So this is the instruction concerning, if you will, the one who was infected. Remember, we were talking about the infection. We started off with this infection. I probably better get one of these wacky doos here. we started off with this infection, this skin disease called Torah. No, now I'm trying to say Torah. Zera'at, right? And so this was that one, had the red and the white and the raised and the deep in the skin and all that kind of. Remember that? We're still on that subject. We haven't changed from it. And then there was, if you will, a bullet point where we talked about something that was specific to the face because it shows up only on the head and only on the face. So then that was a bullet point, if you will. And then now we're on a new bullet point. The subject really hasn't changed. We're still on it. So when they say the infected one, that's who we're talking about. You either had Zara'at, which is to be contagious, we've now uncovered, and not the actual name of a skin disease. It just means that skin disease has become contagious. So it can be on someone who was infected by that which was on the arm, somebody was infected by that thing that was on the face or the head. This is the person we're talking about. If that infected person, right? Are we okay with that? So this is the instruction for that person. Then it says, B'yom, in the day. This doesn't last. This is not a one-day thing, is it? And I'm going to bring this up because some of the sages, they're talking about, well, he's got to make the pronouncement while the sun is out because it says in the day. Okay. Look. There are people who go out there and say that God physically created the heavens and the earth in 7 24-hour periods, one followed after the other. Okay, you have some problems here with that nonsense, and it is nonsense. First off, you can't have a 24-hour period without a sun and a moon. And the moon didn't show up till day 4. So how did you have a day without a moon? Oh, well, it was just 24 hours. How would you, based on what? Now you're just making it up because you want to be right, not wrong, right? But here's your biggest problem. A day in Hebrew is a period of time. And if you recall from these laws that we've been studying on this subject, is that the person notices there's something, this little spot on his arm or on his face or on his head, and he goes to the priest. And the priest looks at it and says, that might be something, it might be nothing. Go home and quarantine yourself for 7 days. 7 days. Then you come back. Well, it hasn't really changed, but you better go back for another 7 days. Now you're up to 14 days. Way past 24 hours at this point. I don't have enough fingers to do the math on that one. But it's a ways. Then they come back on this day, the day of their illness, on the day that they're being declared clean from this illness, and then they have to, if it looks like he's cleared up, now he's got to spend 7 more days living in a tent outside the place, right? That's 21 days bare minimum before you get to this day. Just throwing that out there. So in the day that they were affected by this is a minimum of 21 days. Minimum in the day when they were affected is 21 days. In the day, as the Bible calls it, that they were in the wilderness was 40 years. In the day that they were in Egypt was 430 years. Are you starting to get an idea here that a day is a period of time? Can it be 24 hours? Yes. Is it 24 hours in the Bible? Almost never. Almost never. Is it translated as if it is? Every time. All right. It's wrong, but that's the way it is. So then we have Taharato. This is in the day of his cleansing, the day of his purification. This is really going to become important because purification and cleansing, think about that. There's a lot to that. You purify your clothes when you put them in the washing machine and then into the dryer and then iron them or whatever and then put them in the closet. That's a purification process. When you put the dish soap in your sink and you wash them up and then rinse them off and stick them over here and let them dry natural or with a towel or whatever and put them away, that's a purification process. When you take your car to a car wash and whether you spray it yourself or you send it through a machine or a company that does it by hand or what, that's a purification process. You're cleaning something. So we need to understand this. This is about cleansing. This is purification. This is not remission of sin, which is going to become a thing. So then we have another word here that's real important is vehuva, which it's bow. It's your word bow. To come, which is to go, and to enter, which is to exit. That. Remember that word? We've talked about it many times. The one word used for all those different ways, all those different things. But it's literally of going from one place to the other. It's not the word halach, which is to put one foot in front of the other. The shorter we went from A to B. Of course, these words are in this first sentence. So my translation is pretty simple. This shall be the instructions for those who were affected with a skin disease in the day of their cleansing when they go to the priest. Donna, you mind highlighting or either picture in picture or go on the computer? I don't care which. Okay. Now notice with a skin disease, this is said and it's connected to the word affected. I'm telling you, the reason why these aren't squiggly and why this is underlined and then this is in the square brackets and underlined in blue is I'm explaining to you what this is talking about. This is for clarification purposes. This is to illuminate this. So this shall be the instructions for those. And now this is where you kind of have to add something into the English text so you can understand the sentence. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense in English. Who were affected with the skin disease in the day when they go to the priest. We okay with that? All right, go ahead and come back to me. Now, Rashi wrote that the priest had to make his announcement during the day and not at night. So Rashi didn't know a lot about Hebrew, did he? Actually, he knew all. He my dog knows as much Hebrew as Rashi did. Let me put it that way. Because I do talk to my dog in Hebrew and he does respond. So I'm just saying. He's wrong. That's what I'm saying. The Hebrew word yom sometimes means 24 hours. Sometimes it means it's just. That's what I was going to say about the 7 days of creation. I almost forgot to say that. So the first day of creation could have been 100 bazillion years, 100 gazillion. I don't know what words that are real or not, but frozillion. I have no idea. All I'm saying is that period of time could have lasted for eons. And then the next day could have lasted for eons. But you know what? If you look at the scientific layout of how much time it took for the sun and the stars to expand into what they were, that's in line with one day in the Bible. Then how long it took for the water and the land to separate, that's in step with it, all the way down to when man shows up on that sixth day. It's in line with the Bible. If we understand that a day in the Bible can be a forever kind of number. You follow what I'm saying? The 24-hour a day thing didn't even exist until day 4. Anyway, I've said all that. So now we've got, we're coming to a point where we're going to get confirmation of complete healing. So verse 3 says, V'yazah hakohen el michutz la mechane va'ra'a hakohen vehine ni repa nega ha-za'arat. Yeah, I did. I was thinking I read that wrong. Min ha-zarua. All right, so an important word to talk about before we go on here is ve-yatza. You may have caught that. We would literally, in English, that would be, and he, what does that mean? To go out, to go forth, to germinate, to expand as a plant. These, they use in the sense of going out when speaking of men and other things, especially to go out, to go forth, is used of soldiers to go for war, and similarly, shepherds against a wild beast. We'll talk more about that later. Another important word would be michutz. Michutz. That's the word is chutz, right? And they've added the mi to the front of michutz. The could be mechutz, machutz, muchutz. It's a mem that's been added to the front of the Hebrew word. But that's the word course meaning outside. So this is from outside. Now this is a Hebrew language thing that we would not do this. We don't say from outside the camp, which in Hebrew you do. That makes perfect sense in Hebrew. I couldn't tell you why they do that. I don't know any reason why. I just do know that that's part of the language, and that's been going on apparently since the beginning. But anyway, we're talking about outside, and then it's la mahane, the camp, the place. It's like a place where you set up camp, but let's not get hung up on this, because we're going to get wrong if we try to make this just about a camp. Because the examples that they give is like soldiers setting up a camp to go for war, wandering tribes, that live in tents and pitch their little camps up and stuff like that. I don't want you to get hung up on that, because your camp can be just the property that your synagogue is on. Your camp can be your neighborhood, because a lot of Jews live in a neighborhood where their synagogue is in the center of the neighborhood, and they all live in their houses going around that neighborhood. That's good. Outside of that property that synagogue is sitting on, that would be outside your camp. So let's not get hung up on the fact that it says camp. What was inside the camp? Think about that. What was inside the camp? That was the synagogue, and where basically all the people lived. So, to put that in modern terms, if you live in a place where, like we have here in Austin, Texas, they have a great big synagogue. It's got this big old fence around it. And within that fence, they have other smaller synagogues and schools and shuls and all those kind of things that they have. And then outside of that, you've got all the Jews that live outside of that area. Well, that fenced in area and the part where the Jews live is going to be the encampment. And so if you're going to be told that you have to stay outside the encampment, you're going to have to get out of your own neighborhood. Not just stay away from the synagogue that's fenced in over here. You're going, because the synagogue, if you think about it, all the way to the time of the tent, it was separated by a fence. The people lived outside of that. They were not fenced in. So it's exactly the same thing. So if you're being told you have to live outside the camp, you have to be outside the area where the people are living. That's the camp. So now, let's say you live, like some of our people live a very long way from where this place is. Well, that's not an encampment of Jews unless you live in a neighborhood where it's nothing but Jews. You're not in an encampment there, so you just got to stay out of your house in a situation like that. But our synagogue is sitting on our property where our house is, and it's all within the same, well, we got a fence on two sides anyway. I would have to stay out of our house and away from our synagogue if I'd gotten something like that. So I'm just trying to make you understand that the only time the encampment includes your neighborhood is if it's like what we have up north, where the Jews all live around that place where that synagogue is. Because just think about the wilderness. You had the tabernacle, as it's called, because it was a tent, and then around it there was a fence, and then around that was all the people. All of that together would have been the encampment. So, in a place where you have your synagogue, it's fenced in, the people live in the neighborhood around it, that whole thing is the encampment. But on the other hand, if your synagogue is just sitting somewhere on downtown area somewhere and everyone just lives everywhere else, you can't call the whole city your encampment. If you want to do that and want to stay out of the city, go for it. But that really is missing the point. So we have to kind of keep in mind that the encampment includes the people if it's right there around the synagogue in this case, because we don't have a temple. Well, even if we did have it, even if it was standing in Israel, we would still have to do this. Okay, I probably spent way too much time on that. So our next word is ni repa. Now I know most people are, what? That's not how you say that. Yes, it is. This is the way they would have said it in the biblical times. So it's the way I say it now. It basically it means is healed. In this case, will be healed, but they are talking about is, not really will. It's one of those things that goes both ways in Hebrew. So let's just use the word is healed, because everyone knows, if they know anything about Hebrew, that the noon is future tense. But future tense isn't the same in Hebrew as it is in English. So let's not go there. Anyway, this word is properly, it's to sew together, to mend. So what are they saying? They're saying that this person has been healed. He has been mended. No one sewed him up. I don't know if it got real bad. Maybe I'd be sewn up in a couple of spots. I don't know, but that's not the point. The point is, this is the word for healed. The day that this person is healed. And then it's that word negah. And boy, I went back and forth trying to figure out what word could we use in English for this. Well, I've landed on lesion, if you guys remember, not legion, lesion. And so that's that breaking of the skin and that sore and that contagion and all that was from that initial lesion, which maybe it spread, maybe it didn't. And it could be on the face, it could be on the head, it could be on it really almost any part of the body. There are certain parts of the body it never spoke about. It did say from head to foot, I think, at one time. So basically, that means there's really no part of your body that couldn't have been affected by this, which really can be awful if you think about that. So then we have ha-za-ra-at, and then that was one of those other words that I really had trouble with trying to come up with an English equivalent for the Hebrew word here, because people I kept reading all these scholars saying, "Oh, this word's only used a couple times in the Bible. We just have no way of knowing what it means." Yeah, we do have a way. So I have settled on contagious. I really believe that's what's trying to be said here. It's not trying to name a disease. It's trying to say if that disease is contagious. Because we don't talk about, in this verse, we're not talking about acne. It's very clear that we're not talking about acne, and it's a skin disease, and we know that it is not contagious. It will spread. There's things you do, that can make it spread on you, but you can't give it to somebody else. So you're not contagious. So I think that this is a good word for this, contagious. Then we have, I think we may have already had this word, ha-za-rua. That'd be the infected one, right? That's a word we started off with. I was thinking we had that word already. So this is the one who has been infected. This is one stricken, one smitten, one suffering with an infectious disease, and that's to be stricken, to be smitten. Well, what happens in English Bibles? All of a sudden, it's smitten of God, even though of God wasn't even in there. It becomes smitten of God. And the Jews followed suit with this. This quickly became a punishment from God, right? It's a terrible thing. It's terrible that we went that way in our religion. All right. So our translation is, they will meet with the priest outside the camp, and the priest will look, and behold, I just said legion is healed. The infected one is no longer contagious. Wow, now that's pretty awesome. Of the word will meet, because remember we just said he'll meet him outside the camp. Even Ezra and Nachmanides both wrote that a person had to be brought by force if he refused. People, please listen to me. Please hear what this old man has to say. Judaism is predicated on what's the word I'm looking for? Or words. On self-monitoring, self-control, what am I looking for here? No, it's not far from it though. See, when God created the heavens and the earth and all that is in it, including the people, he created it with this thing called Hasatan. That's not the Satan. That's the resistance. Everything has its opposite. Not everything has its equal, but everything does have an opposite. And so if there's good, there's bad. If there's up, there's down. If there's forward, there's reverse. Everything has this thing that resists it in life. Just trying to live is resisted by death every day. Right? So everything about God works in this manner. And when it comes down to service to God, we are not made to serve God ever. We choose to serve God. And this is another one of those places where Judaism has just gone off the rails. Are the Jews the chosen people? Yeah, to the degree that God chose the Jews to present himself to and make covenant with, so that eventually this covenant would spread out to the whole world, which it has. But beyond that, that's it. When the Bible talks about uses the word for chosen, it's wrong what's being said in English, and it's wrong what the Jews have done with it. The Jews are not the chosen people. They are the ones who God chose to make covenant with that would spread to the whole world. But Judaism is made up of the people who choose. Because we have a choice in this world. We can either choose to follow God, or we can choose not to. So to say that we have to force people to go to the priest, no, it couldn't be more wrong than that. Because if you're unwilling to obey God's law, then you're not in covenant with God. It's that simple. If you're unwilling to do that in a place, for instance, in the place of Israel, like what we're talking about here, then yeah, their government has the right, biblically speaking, if it's a biblically based government, which today's is not, but let's say it back when it was, they had the right to say, get out. And you needed to go. Because their government was based on this law. But their government was not set there to force people to live by God's law. The ones who monitor whether we live by God's law is not somebody else, it's us. We have to choose to live by God's law, which means we have to choose either to obey it or not. And if we're not obeying it, we're not living by it. We're not in covenant with God. You have to obey it for any of that to work. So it really bugs me when people go around saying things like they have to be brought by force. No, they do not. Of the words outside the camp, even Ezra wrote that the man cannot enter the camp at this point because his sacrifices have not yet been made. Now, that's speculative, but my money's on even Ezra. I think he's right. I mean, it makes sense, but it's still speculative. You can't say that is beyond any shadow of a doubt the reason. Why? Because God didn't tell us the reason. And if God doesn't tell us the reason, then us going around saying, by golly, we know what it is. No, let's not do that. So let's not elevate this man to the level of canonization or something, because it's just speculation. I think he's right, but that's we have to make sure you understand that's just speculation. We don't know. Okay, so now we're going to hit what I call step one. Step one. This is the day of the cleansing. So let's get into the steps that you have to take to be cleansed. And so verse 4 starts us off with what I call step one. Ziva, that's the name of my granddaughter. HaKohen ve'lakach la mitaher shete ziparim Hayot tehorot ve'etz eruz usheni to la'at ve'ezov. Hopefully you heard every single syllable, because that's what I was trying to do. We start with Ziva and my granddaughter. No, it's not. This means to set up, to constitute, to appoint, to place someone over another one, to decree. It's a command. We just say command in English. So this would be and command, if you will. This is literally it's a command. So this is a command. Velakach, and take. And take. This is the word used most often. Well, I shouldn't say most often. Is often used, let's say it that way, of a man taking a wife. So he does. It's not the caveman days with he grabs his big fat stick in one arm and grabs a woman by the collar and drags her into his cave. No, that's not what it is. When a man took a wife, it was generally, think about Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Abraham wants Yitzhak to get married, so he tells one of his servants, go into town and go pick a family, someone from a certain family, and he names it off, and he says, you find a wife for my son. So he goes in, he finds this cute little girl, and he gets himself invited into their home. He offers all kinds of money and tells him how rich his master is, and his master has got a son that's just really good looking, and he's all that in a bag of chips. And so she goes home with the guy and marries his son. It's a very different world than we live in today. But no one took her and no one purchased her. She's not being purchased. The money that's being left there is for her and for her parents. It's all about taking care of the woman and all that kind of stuff. She was old enough that she could go ahead and go back. So it was a gift to the parents to help them. They're losing a vital part of what sustains them. This young girl goes out and gets their water every day, probably milk the cow or the goat maybe every day, and that kind of thing. And so it was customary to give them these gifts to help them out because she's going to be gone now. So it was usually pretty lavish, the gifts were. Anyway, so it's to take a wife, but it's this idea of adherence. We would say to stick together like glue or something like that. Well, that's a good way to describe a good marriage. A good marriage is a man and a woman coming together in heart, soul, mind, and strength. You know, that's why we talk about them in biblical terms as becoming one, because they get to where they can finish each other's sentences. They know each other better than the one knows themselves. I mean, that's this idea of take. So our next word is la mi taher, which literally means to pure. But it's from the word that's to shine, to be bright, hence to be or to become clean or pure. Just think about the things that wipe down and they become very shiny and bright, like you spray your car and dry it all off, and now all of a sudden it's real shiny. It's but we use the word pure in the Bible more often than not, but it's to become clean. And in this case, we're saying that the person has become clean. They've gone through the whole, they had the skin illness and all that, but now that skin illness is gone. And so now this is the purification process. This is part of what makes them clean. And there's more to being clean. That, for instance, if you go and you've fallen in the mud and now you get up and, well, I shouldn't use that example because I'm going to use that later. But let's say you fall in the mud, you get your clothes all dirty and yourself all dirty, and you go in and you take a bath, put the same clothes on. You're kind of in the same place you were when you got home. What'd you do that for? You hadn't finished the cleaning process, right? You haven't completely purified. You've only purified part of it. It's like you go to wash your dishes and you wash the plate, but you don't wash the fork. What? You know what I'm saying? You got to do the whole thing. Anyway, so our next word is Hayot. Is from, of course, the word Lachaim, Hayah, to live, living, that kind of stuff. Then we have Tehorot. Actually, that's the same word we had before. It's the purification, the cleanliness, blah, blah, blah. Then we have Ve'etz. We haven't had that word in a long while. That's tree. But in this case, you have to understand, God's not telling them to get a tree. He's telling them to get, can we call it timber or slivers or splinters? It's going to be something small. We need to keep that in mind. But this timber, this wood, if you will, needs to be from erez. It needs to be from cedar. It's what we call cedar now. And then also it says usheni, which sounds like 7, doesn't it? It's the word for scarlet, for crimson. But that's followed by tola'at, which is often used for scarlet or crimson. But the word actually means worm. So here it's calling it a scarlet worm. It's not telling you to get scarlet from one place and then scarlet from a worm. It's calling it a scarlet worm. And this was missed by all the translators that I looked at. And then it says ve'ezo, that's hyssop. I don't know what hyssop is at all. I couldn't even find anything about it that was worth reading. So I don't know what to tell you. We'll have to look that up one of these days. If we ever need it, we'll have to figure it out. But I don't know what it is. Okay, so my translation of verse 4. And the priest will command. Now remember, he's come to the priest. He's thinks he's pure, and the priest takes a look and says, I think you are pure. So now the priest will command the healed person. That's in those square bracket things in blue to illuminate the word command. He will command the healed person to take for his purity 2 unblemished birds. Now, this is an issue here because, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. He'll take 2 unblemished birds, and I use the word timber, and then I added the word behind it, shavings. Go ahead and go to the computer, Donna. This is what I'm talking about. We take this 2 unblemished, that's the word for, put in here kosher, because it says birds. Remember the word living? 2 unblemished living birds. What's he talking about? He's talking about kosher. So that you know that this is not a great big of cedar and a scarlet worm. You guys with me? All right, let's move on. So, note, if you will, there is no such thing as a pure and or unblemished dead bird. This was missed by most of the translators. There's no such thing as a pure, unblemished dead bird. If the bird is dead, it is impure. It's why you have to cook it. I say that so that you understand that when it says living bird, you don't think like others do about it. Arguments have arisen as to who was supposed to provide the sacrifice and who was actually to make the sacrifice. However, the Hebrew text is clear. The healed person purchases, takes for himself, lakach, takes to himself or purchases the sacrifice while the priest performs the sacrifice. Now, of this unblemished kosher bird that I'm talking about, the living bird, even Ezra wrote that any bird suitable for an offering could be brought. I'm not sure if suitable included unclean birds from his statement. I don't know if that's where he was going with it. I actually don't think he was. I think he was basically saying the same thing I am, kosher. Rashi argued that it could be any bird as long as it's not diseased. Really? Really, Rashi? You're going to go out and get yourself a buzzard and sacrifice that to God? Are you really, Rashi? I'd like to. Too bad he's not around. I'd sure like to hear his answer to that one. But it is clear that neither man recognized the idiom, because that was an idiom, a living bird. It's a bird that Jews are allowed to eat. Rashi also wrote that birds were sacrificed to point out that the disease was a punishment from God for slander. The symbolism of the birds was because they chirp, Nachmanides said that zipor, that's your word for bird, was used instead of oaf because zipor indicates a young bird, since he apparently felt that only young birds twerp. That's not the right word. It's chirp, isn't it? Well, these guys were twerps. What can I say? They were chirping twerps. But they're both wrong. That's all I have to say about that. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. Well, let's see what we can, if we can get through 5, we'll try. Verse 5 says, Ve'ziva hakohen ve'shachat et hazipor ha'echat el keli cheres al ma'yim chayim. Okay, so we don't have too many words. One that we didn't have was ve'shachat. That's and slaughter. It's to slay. It's a barbecue. I'm telling you, if we would change the word to barbecue, a lot more people would be interested in Judaism. Anyway, ha-echat. Okay, this is echad, which we usually translate as one. And when it's echat, how can you have plural one? That makes it plural if you think about it. That's a plural ending, right? So what are we doing? We're going from one to first. We would say first in English. That's why they put echat. So ha-echad is the first. Keli, that's the word for implement. Probably whatever is made. It's a utensil, a vessel, that kind of thing. So it's your dishes. It's your pots and pans and your dishes. That's what keli is. Then we have cheres. So in this case, they have to be made out of clay. That's the word for clay. It can't be made out of stainless steel. It can't. Yeah, they used to cook in clay pots. Of course, the clay pots fall all apart afterwards. I don't know if it did every time, but the one time I saw someone cooking a clay pot, it fell apart, which was part of the process. And they were not surprised by that. They knew it was going to happen. All right, so then we have that word all or upon. That's that word that we spent an entire message on last week. So this is, don't remember if we got that far last week, but this is using the word all for for in, instead of on or upon or above or all of those other ones that we came up with. This is a time when it's going to be in. This was in that, right? I meant to get that far. I don't think I did. I might have. I just don't remember. Then mayim, that's waters in plural, because biblically speaking and physically speaking, there's no such thing as water. There's waters, right? You can't get, literally, you can't get a single drop. Even a single drop of water has 3 ingredients in it, H and 2 O's. Just saying. That'd be hydrogen and 2 oxygens. Then Hayim is that word for living in life, right? Which I think I talked about. Maybe I haven't. I don't remember. But here's my translation. And the priest will give the command to slaughter the first bird in a vessel of clay with water from a spring. And that's the end of it, with water from the springs. But can we go, let's go to the computer view of that, please. I said in, I guess I settled on with. This is the all right here. Because if we try to make it on, sacrifice a bird on living water, if you're Jewish, you know that that's spring water. Or at the temple, where's the living water? Where's the river? Where's this? You didn't have any of those things there. Hezekiah did long after this. And how are you going to get the, what are you supposed to go down in Hezekiah's tunnel and do that? Come on, that's the water supply. So, water, not on water or above the water, but we're instead of in. I think I started to go with in water, but then that gives you the idea of you got to dip it in the water to sacrifice it. And that's not right either. That's not the point. That's not what we're doing here. And that'll become clear as time goes on. Let's see if I can talk a little bit about, okay, I think I can get the rest of this in. Of the words the priest will command to slaughter. Even Ezra, not understanding basic biblical Hebrew grammar, wrote that the priest would command another priest or Israelite to make the sacrifice. While it is true that Hebrew allows for someone to command someone else to do something and thus can say that they did it even though someone else physically did it, because if you're in command of something, you can do that. Then that's that. In spite of all that, this verse is simply telling us that every requirement has been met and that the time for the sacrifice is now. That's all. That's the whole point. The priest that gave the command is most likely the one who will do the slaughtering. He's not likely to pass that on to somebody else. Now, if it's the high priest, he will pass that on to somebody else. But if it's a regular priest, why would he pass on his job to somebody else? That doesn't make any sense. Even Ezra went on to say that the idea, well, I guess that's who we're talking about, said that the idea of the leper making the sacrifice was far-fetched. He also correctly pointed out that the water had to be from a running water source. That's why it says living water. That means running, so it's going to be a spring or a river or something like that. That's what they mean by living water. It's an idiom as old as time for the Jews. So let's see, what did he start off saying? Oh, he was saying that the priest is going to pass it on. The priest could, but it's not likely, is all I'm saying. But what he did say about it being far-fetched that the leper was going to make the sacrifice, I totally agree with him there. That's very far-fetched. And the fact that he said that the water had to be from a living water, from a running water source, I totally agree with him there. Rashi wrote that there was just enough water in the bowl such that it would still look like blood. You know how I feel about that guy. I try to hold back. I don't mean to tear him down because I know so many people love him, but I think he was a moron. And I know he didn't speak Hebrew. Anyway, it is most likely that the water was there to keep the blood from coagulating, but that's still speculative on my part because God didn't say. Just think I should throw that out there. That is as far as I can go. I got to turn this thingy off before it starts beeping. I have literally run out of time. Shalom, shalom, y'all.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ha'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.